All right, so it's time for another Garmin Pilot versus Foreflight review. And I have to say, I'm actually pleasantly impressed with Garmin Pilot. They've fixed a lot of the issues that I've had, but we're going to go through some of the issues with both programs and where I think they kind of stand up to each other. So the first thing is the map. In earlier videos, up to 3 years ago, I made the claim that I thought Garmin Pilot had the best looking map, and I still hold that. You can see this is the current view of the map in Garmin Pilot. And then if we put Foreflight back up here, this is the same view in Garmin Pilot. I mean in Foreflight. So the Garmin Pilot app, the map itself is just it's a really nice, clean looking map. Now, having said that, if we go back over here to Garmin Pilot, you can see if I scroll in here, well, there's two things. First of all, if I'm scrolling around trying to find an airport, let's say I zoom in here and you see all the private airports that have shown up. If I start, I'm going to grab in the bottom right hand corner and drag up, and you'll notice there's no detail here. There's no airports, there's nothing until I actually let go of the screen. So if I'm scrolling around trying to find something, I've got to keep letting go of the screen to get it to refresh. And it does that forever. There is no situation where it doesn't do that. By comparison, if we flip over here to Foreflight and I scroll in, I can move, and I'm keeping my finger on the map, and I can move around and it refreshes, pretty quickly. So Foreflight is definitely still ahead of the game with that respect. So the other thing about Garmin Pilot that is a little weird is, let's take this 17GA for example. As I scroll in on this, it's still 17GA. It doesn't really change. In order for me to know the name of that airport, I have to touch the airport, and then I have to hit the little R for the airport thing to get the name of that particular airport. And in comparison, if we switch back over here to Foreflight, you can see that as I scroll in, it actually gives me not only the airport identifier but the name of the airport. So Foreflight gives me a little more information. Now, also, I want to mention, you'll notice in Foreflight for the Atlanta airspace, they give us these little boxes that gives us the altitudes for each of the regions. I actually don't like that. You'll notice that I've got labels that are sitting on top of the altitudes there. And also, I'm older and I don't see that well up close anymore. And so if I got my sunglasses on, I constantly have to keep putting my glasses on to read these little bitty numbers. So it's just a little bit hard to read that stuff. Where if we look over here at Garmin Pilot, they give me these nice big, easy to read numbers for the different areas. So I do, prefer the Garmin Pilot in a lot of aspects on this map view. They do a really good job of keeping this thing clean and usable. Now, another thing while I'm here on the map that is really cool is if I hit nearest. So if I ever have an emergency and I need to find the closest airport and I hit nearest, it immediately pops up and highlights the major airports that I may be interested in trying to land at, and it gives them the closest to the farthest up at the top. And so I can come up here and pick any one of these. It gives me the direction and distance to that particular airport, and then I can activate it and make that my direct to. So very, very cool, very clean, very quick. In comparison, if we see, how do I get out of nearest? Okay. By comparison, if I'm trying to get this fourth finger scroll thing to work, and it's trying to be difficult. By comparison over here, the only thing that I can do is click on my airplane. So I have to, and if it's bumpy weather or I'm stressed out and trying to fly the airplane, it's a little difficult to get your finger to get on there. And then what I end up with is information about that particular airport, and then I've got nearby weather. I can come over here to info, but the problem is if I'm over, I clicked on an airport, I'm getting information about that airport. I'm not getting what I'm looking for. So what I need to do is click out off the airport, somewhere out like this. And so then it gives me a list of the nearby airports. And it gives me, northwest 2.5 miles, but then like you'll see 98 GA, it doesn't give me any information about how far it is or what direction. So it's really not really helpful for a stressful situation where I'm trying to find an airport to get down to as quickly as possible. So ForeFlight, as far as an emergency situation, ForeFlight doesn't really have an option for me as far as I'm concerned. I mean, you can get to it, but it is absolutely not an upfront thing that I want to, that I need, as far as using that. So that is a couple of the things on the maps themselves. Now, the next thing I want to take a look at is the checklist. So we'll take a real quick dive into the checklist. If I go to home and then come down here to checklist, the Garmin Pilot app is easier to set up the checklist than ForeFlight. ForeFlight's got some oddities to it as far as how you go through and set them up. Their nomenclature and flow is a little weird, where Garmin Pilot, you just set them up and you're done. But here is something about Garmin Pilot that I absolutely love. So I don't use checklists in ForeFlight, and I have them all set up, but I find myself, I hardly ever go to them. And the reason is because I normally, and I'll show you ForeFlight first. So if I want to look at checklist in ForeFlight, I have to leave everything I'm doing. All my navigation is going to go away. So I've got to go over here to more. I got to go up here to checklist, and then I pick whatever it is that I want to do. And then I go through here and pick them and go through. Now, having said that, the process of actually choosing these things in ForeFlight are easier, and I also have voice commands that I can give to select that I have properly gone through the checklist. So I do prefer the actual functionality of the final checklist in ForeFlight. It's a lot quicker, and it automatically moves me down to the next item that I'm working on. By comparison, if we go back over here to Garmin Pilot and we go to checklist, I don't really have anything highlighting what the next checklist item is. And when I pick it, it just turns green. So I have to pick right on that little bitty box, and it doesn't move me down to the next item. Now, obviously the next white item is my checklist item, but I think ForeFlight does a better job of highlighting what that item is. And ForeFlight has a little bit bigger font for that stuff so that I can read it a little bit more easily. However, Garmin Pilot does something that ForeFlight does not do that I think might actually have me using these things more often. So you'll notice over here on the right, I have a little arrow that I can click that will open up a split view. And I can display, by clicking in this little icon here, I can display all kinds of things in that split view, not just synthetic vision, which is in ForeFlight, I can only display synthetic vision. So in here, I can display synthetic vision, or I can come down here and display checklist. So it allows me to keep flying the airplane, keep having my navigation data here while I'm going through my checklist. Now, again, they could do a whole lot better job of highlighting what the thing is that I'm supposed to be reading, and then make it a little bit cleaner and quicker when I'm clicking them to go to that next item. But the actual ability to open it up while I still have my map screen open is huge. So I really, really like that. Now, if we close that for a minute and let's take a look at the see, we've got checklists. Let's take a look at the flight plan itself. If you look up here at the top, if I click the flight plan, it'll open up and allow me to put in my flight plan, I can either quickly type in a bunch of waypoints up here at the top, or I can do them individually by hitting add waypoint. I've got all my airport information and stuff down here at the bottom. So this process is pretty good in both of the apps. There's not a ton of pros or cons on either one of them in this respect. However, let's pretend for a minute that we're flying along here and the weather's bad, and so I need to shoot an approach down here at Thomaston. And so in Garmin Pilot, there's a couple different ways that I can get to this. I can split screen this. I can come up here and tell it I want to look at charts. I can go to the destination. I can scroll down here and go to, let's say I want to shoot the RNAV 30. And so now I've got a nice little view here of my approach plate on the right and the map on the left. Let's say that I am going to enter at Hutzer, and also I want to go ahead and throw this over here onto the map because I also want to display my synthetic vision on the right, so that it's all pretty functional. However, not nearly as functional as Foreflight. So let's, again, I don't know what the magic is on switching these stupid things, but all right, so let's go back over here to maps and let's do the same thing in Foreflight. So in Foreflight, instead of going to my charts and stuff, I'm just going to go up here and edit my flight plan, and I'm going to tell it I'm going to do a procedure. I'm going to do an approach. I'm going to shoot the RNAV 30. You'll notice that it has highlighted the entire approach. It's also showing me my current course to KOPN. I can see easily that Hutzer is going to be my best choice for entering the flight plan or the approach. I'm going to enter at Hutzer, and I'm going to go ahead and tell it to add the route. Now, what you'll notice is that it has changed my course. So instead of going to KOPN, I'm going to Hutzer, and it has also added all the waypoints for the entire approach so that I can shoot this approach and see visually on the approach plate where I'm at and where I'm supposed to be. So a lot more functional, a lot quicker, and not a lot of thought that's got to go into what I'm supposed to be doing. Now I can also come up here and tell it to open up my synthetic vision, and so now I can have both of these up just like I do in Garmin Pilot. So this is pretty much the same functionality. The difference here is that in the synthetic vision, the split screen view in Foreflight, I can only see synthetic vision. I don't have the ability to view checklists and other things. So Garmin Pilot definite heads up on the split screen thing, but as far as selecting the approach and getting my entry point and that kind of thing, it's a lot easier in Foreflight. I can, and this was something else, is I can grab my route and drag it down here to Hutzer so that I can at least get my direction, but I can't do it with the approach plate open. Now, one thing I can do is I can come up here above the approach plate and grab the little line and drag it down here to Hutzer so I can add it in, but it's not the same thing because you'll notice that it has only added it to Hutzer and it hasn't gone in through my procedure turn and all the other elements of shooting this approach. It gets me started, but it doesn't really go all the way. So Foreflight, definite hands up on the approach plates and being able to work through that kind of thing. So let's go back over here to the map. Let's get rid of our approach plate, and we'll get rid of synthetic vision. And so let's take a look at Street View. So we're going to go down here and we're going to go to Open Street Map. And so this gives us a street map, and we'll zoom in here on our area. So most of the things, in the earlier versions of Garmin Pilot, they had no street view. They didn't really give you any detail at all as to what is going on in that particular area. So they seem to have fixed a lot of this. So this is all working pretty good. So the street view between Garmin Pilot and Foreflight are pretty much similar now. So there's no real point in digging too much into that. So we'll go back over here to this. So, and also down here at the bottom, you've got layers. This is where you set up your on-ship, your, overlays, maps and charts and all that kind of stuff. So, pretty intuitive and pretty quick to get through. If you go do the same thing in in ForeFlight, it's just this gearbox, and then you can scroll down and select different elements that you want to see. So we'll go ahead and get rid of the plate. And also, if we go to flight plan, you'll notice all those points that it added in here. So if I go to Navlog, you can see it's added quite a bit of stuff to my flight plan to be able to get through my approach. But when I edit, I can delete all of that extra stuff with a single click. So while it did add a bunch of stuff, it's pretty quick to get rid of it. So the things that you see across the bottom of ForeFlight, they do show up in Garmin Pilot. They just show up here at the top instead of down at the bottom. So that stuff is pretty similar. I'm kind of curious what emergency does. So emergency looks like it's even better than the normal stuff. It has opened up my checklist and automatically taken me to the emergency section, so I can go to engine shutdown and start walking through that procedure. And at the same time, it has brought up all the closest airports for me to try to land at. And in this case, it's included the private strips because I've clicked emergency. So this is even more rocking than the nearest thing. So I really dig that. Again, ForeFlight completely missing the ball with the emergency thing. They've got no functionality at all for any of this kind of stuff. So another point for Garmin for being able to do that. Now, another thing is the the logbook. So if we go over here to a logbook inside of Garmin Pilot, the logbook does, in my opinion, the logbook functions in ForeFlight, they automatically turn on when I'm taking off, but 9 times out of 10 they do not stop when I land. I end up having to manually go in and tell it to stop. So the downside is that I'm only recording time in Garmin Pilot when I'm in the air, which to me is good enough. I'm not trying to pad my logbook, so it lets me know how much time the airplane was actually in the air and how long my trips took. So the Garmin Pilot does a lot better job of starting and stopping the logbook to give you what you're looking for. However, if I go in here to reports, and I'm in the logbook function in Garmin Pilot, I can come up here to aircraft types, and I can tell it I only want to look at the Lockheed 12, for example, and it'll give me the details for what are in the logbook for that particular airplane, or for that particular type of airplane. But I don't have the ability, or at least I don't see the ability of me looking at a particular airplane. It's only by type. So I can go over here to aircraft types, and it'll give me a breakdown this way. Now I don't use Garmin Pilot a lot, so this logbook doesn't have much in it, but it does. It's functional, and it works for the most part. The one thing that I was a little put off with, if I go over here to entries and let's just add a new entry, you'll notice that I have airplane types in here. I have pilot name. I have the aircraft identifier. I've got, things about this airplane that I took the time to put into the system. But you'll notice that every logbook entry, it has no name on here, which isn't a huge deal. But if I click in it, instead of it giving me a list of pilots that I have set up, it makes me type in the name. Same thing for aircraft type. It's asking me for aircraft. Oh, now it wasn't doing this before. That's interesting. That's changed just in the last few minutes. But again, aircraft identifier, if I get rid of this, I have to manually type that back in. It doesn't even have a list that comes up while I'm typing. So I have to type it in. So there's just a few things here that are a little odd. Why do I have to type this stuff in when it's, obviously in my list? But overall, it's fully functional. It does a pretty good job of keeping up, and again, it does a better job in the end of starting and stopping your flights than ForeFlight has been doing for me. So I'll kind of give the leg up on Garmin Pilot for this, but I do want to mention, if I go over here to ForeFlight and we go to the logbook here, if I go down here to reports, and if you back up, you can see I've got aircraft. It'll give me a list of all the airplanes that I've flown and how many hours I've gotten each one of them. If we go to reports, I can go to, say, an experience report. It gives me a lot of information there. So ForeFlight's got more reporting and stuff than Garmin does in the logbook side. So, but at the end of the day, they both function and do a pretty good job. I'm kind of getting back to logging my time in a manual logbook because it's kind of a pain in the butt. I've got a ton of logbook entries in ForeFlight, and now I'm thinking about switching over to Garmin Pilot. And what happens to all my logbook in ForeFlight? I'm sure that they're doing these logbooks to try to lock us into using only their app, but at the end of the day, you're kind of stuck with all your stuff being in one place. So that's the logbooks. We've covered street views. The other thing, one of my complaints earlier on in Garmin Pilot was the FBO stuff. So let's take a look. If I go back over here to the map, let's go to our airport down here that we're going to be landing at. We've got a quick thing here for fuel, procedures, runway frequencies, all that stuff. Just ForeFlight's pretty similar, but I'm going to go over here to the map page. The problem was if you go to FBOs, it gives you a list of FBOs, and then I don't really know which ones have fuel, which ones don't, what the prices are, any of that kind of stuff. And then getting information about them, I've got to go through and click all this stuff. So if I needed the address, for example, of this particular FBO so that I can take my rental car back or whatever it happens to be, I don't even know. I don't know. It's a little bit off-putting as far as the way this is laid out. They did fix things if I go to fuel prices, where it gives me not only the fuel prices at each FBO at that airport, which is something that they didn't do before, but it also gives me local airports that are around that airport and their fuel prices. So that's pretty cool. But again, if I need the address of this FBO, I'm not sure where I'm supposed to get that. In comparison, if we go over here to ForeFlight and we go over here to KOPN full screen and I go to FBOs, it gives me a nice basic information with phone numbers of each FBO, what their gas prices are. If I click on it, it'll actually flip over and give me the address. And then if I pick on the address, it'll actually pull up my maps on my phone. If I'm running this on the phone, I can call them from here, email them, whatever it is that I'm trying to get done. So all of the information is extremely quick and easily available. And they even have the little arrows here that I can click to get directions. It'll automatically open the map and take me to that place. And also, this is another cool thing. You see down here at the bottom, it says add a comment. I can actually put information in here about this airport that I want to store to help me remember the experience I had there, or maybe they had a separate frequency for their lights at night, or some special thing that I need to make sure I'm aware of when I go back in there. That I have the ability to do in ForeFlight. I do not seem to have that capability in Garmin Pilot. So there really isn't anything for me. Actually, there is remarks, but I don't know how I would add anything. That's just something that they seem to put in themselves. But so anyway, that's something lacking. But again, I don't know how I would get the address. So location on field, none of this stuff is clickable. Hours, phone, amenities, maintenance, sales. So there's literally nothing here to help me get to the airport. So I don't know, it just needs some work. So they have fixed the fuel price problem that I had. That was the big thing, but there's still, some work to be done on this, on the FBO side. So we have gone through our approaches, the airport info, the split screen thing again in Garmin Pilot is just rocking. Being able to display all of this type of stuff on the right hand side and easily flip between them is awesome. I can't say enough about that. So, at the end of the day, Foreflight and Garmin Pilot are very close to each other. In my opinion, they're the top two contenders in this market. They both are pretty expensive to have a full version of. There is one other thing I want to mention is I have XM Weather. I've got a little weather data thing that I bought with Foreflight. It's a couple $100. In order for me to get XM Weather with Garmin Pilot, I have to go purchase a Garmin product, and it's $700-800 to buy just to get XM Weather. So not only am I going to pay $35 a month, I've got to spend a pretty excessive amount of money just to get the receiver so that I can get XM Weather. So that's a little off-putting for having to do that. But other than that, it interfaces really well with my 650 that I have in the Lockheed and the 750 I have in the Beech 18. So the interfacing is all pretty fluid. It also has a really nice feature for being able to grab my updates off of the Garmin page and automatically update the 650 through the Flight Stream 510 that I have in the Lockheed. That's a really, really cool feature. I'm going to try using Garmin Pilot here for the next few months and see if I end up wanting to go back to Foreflight or if I'm going to be happy just using Garmin Pilot. Right now, I'm still in the learning stage, trying to figure out the quickest way to get to certain things, but they do have enough other features. I'm really going to miss the approach plate process that Foreflight has. They just blow Garmin away with that. But outside of that, most of the functionality that I need, Garmin Pilot has, and they do a pretty good job of presenting it. So we're going to give Garmin Pilot a chance here for the next few months and see how things go.